Okay, I understand that we are now streaming, so we can begin the round. Judge Cantor.
Good morning, everyone. Even those of you I can't currently see. We have a little bit of specific instructions on how to begin OLT as opposed to maybe a normal amped round, but I think we can mostly get started. So we're going to call the case of Stevie Rogers versus Drew Mars. I'm Judge Cantor. Scoring judges, if you could look at the two buttons in your lower left, make sure to keep your audio and video off unless the bailiff instructs otherwise. Beyond that, why don't we have pretrial matters? Anything to attend to from the parties?
Yes, Your Honor. Good morning, Judge Cantor. May we make introductions before the court?
Please.
Good morning. My name is Karar Azadi, and I, along with my co-counsel, Riley Lee,
Good morning, Your Honor.
Morning.
represent the plaintiff, Stevie Rogers, in today's case.
Good morning, Your Honor.
Morning, Ms. Rogers.
Permission to state appearances for the defense.
Please.
Good morning, Your Honor. My name is Brennan Bartley. I'm joined today by my co-counsel, Mr. Brandon Benjamin.
Good morning, Your Honor.
Morning.
Together, we represent the defendant in this case, Ms. Drew Mars.
Good morning, Your Honor.
Morning, Ms. Mars.
And after plaintiff has finished their pretrial matters, we have a few we'd like to go over as well.
All right. Plaintiff, what do we have from you?
Your Honor, firstly, we'd like to use Rule 603 and 615, the constructive swearing in and sequestration of all witnesses, barring party representatives, who will be, again, constructively present throughout today's trial.
Any word on the defense from that?
No objections.
All right. 603 and 615, constructive sworn, constructive sequester.
We'd also like to draw the court's attention to Stipulation 16, which states that Exhibits 1 through 7 have been pre-admitted prior to today's trial, and so they'll be used as if they're already in evidence.
Anything from the defense on that?
That's our understanding as well, Your Honor.
All right.
And finally, Your Honor, after a sustained objection, would you like us to move to strike or assume that that testimony has already been stricken?
I'm going to leave it to the parties to decide whether or not they need to strike any particular statement made on the record or question asked. I think that that's a tactical decision that you should make on your own.
Yes, Your Honor. With that, the plaintiff's ready to proceed.
All right. The defense.
Yes, Your Honor, just one matter. We'd ask that all objection arguments requiring an offer of proof be heard in a constructive sidebar outside of the earshot of the members of the jury.
Anything from the plaintiff on constructive sidebar? Mr. Rosati, anything from the plaintiff on constructive sidebar?
I'm sorry, Your Honor. No objection to that. So it didn't come through.
That's all right. And we'll just have to be patient with everyone regarding technology issues. So no worries about that. Constructive sidebar is granted.
The defense is ready to proceed to opening statements.
Yes. One moment here. I have somebody in the waiting room and I need to make sure whether I should admit them or not.
That is a staff member that can admit it.
Okay. All right. Opening statement for the plaintiff.
Yes, Your Honor. Your Honor, opposing counsel, members of the jury, may it please the court. $20 million, 2 pills, and 1 fingerprint. In today's case, I want you to pay special attention to these 3 pieces of evidence. Because when you do, it will become clear that it was the defendant, Drew Mars, who killed Agatha Lee for a $20 million payout. Let's start from the beginning. The plaintiff in today's case, Stevie Rogers, was always close with her grandmother. Growing up, they were practically inseparable, playing games, watching movies, telling stories. They had your typical granddaughter-grandmother relationship. But in 2008, Stevie Rogers' mother and Miss Lee's only daughter died tragically and unexpectedly in a car accident. All of a sudden, Miss Rogers found it more difficult to spend time with her grandmother. Memories of family and of her mom made it too painful. But Miss Rogers knew that the relationship she had with her grandmother was something special. She knew that no amount of time could keep them apart. That's why in 2018, Miss Rogers decided it was time to reconnect with her grandmother. She showed up at her doorstep, but was surprised to see that Miss Lee, she wasn't living alone. That's when Stevie met the defendant. You see, members of the jury, Miss Lee, she was no ordinary person. She was one of America's best-selling novelists, author of Death in a Bottle, one of the most popular murder mysteries ever written. The success of that novel meant that Miss Lee was the sole owner of a $20 million estate, including a multi-million-dollar home referred to as Lee Manor. Well, that type of money, well, that'll get you a lot of attention. But Miss Lee was always wary of those who got too close. That is, besides the defendant. You see, the defendant had been living with Miss Lee for 10 years as a live-in caretaker. And during those 10 years, Miss Lee had learned to trust the defendant. She trusted him so much that in February of 2018, Miss Lee made the defendant the sole beneficiary of that $20 million estate. But when Miss Rogers showed back up in the picture, things began to change. Miss Lee began reconnecting with the only family she had left, her granddaughter, Stevie Rogers. They started doing what they had done when Stevie was younger. They started watching movies again, playing games, sharing stories. It was as if no time had passed at all. And that's why on August 14th of 2018, Miss Lee decided she wanted to rewrite her will. She wanted to rework it so that Miss Rogers was the sole beneficiary of that $20 million estate. When the defendant overheard this conversation, she was furious. She knew she needed to come up with a plan and she needed to act fast before Miss Lee had a chance to formally rewrite her will. That's when she came up with a plan. The defendant knew that Miss Lee had a rare allergy to chlorandramine, a common over-the-counter prescription to treat heart conditions. The defendant also knew that that chlorandramine was identical in size, shape, and color to Winterin, Miss Lee's arthritis medication. All she had to do now was switch those two pills. And on the evening of August 14th, 2018, the defendant slipped into Miss Lee's bedroom and swapped her Winterin pills for chlorandramine. All she had to do now was wait. The next morning, Miss Lee was found unresponsive in her room, having died from a fatal allergic reaction to chlorandramine. Now, members of the jury, how do we know that it was the defendant? How do we know that it was Drew Mars who swapped those pills? Well, we heard that she had the motive, the means, and the opportunity. But you'll also hear today that the only piece of forensic evidence found at the scene, well, that belonged to the defendant. You'll meet Detective M. Bond. Detective Bond will come before you and tell you that in the defendant's closet, there was a black bag that was found. And inside that black bag was a bottle of pills containing chlorandramine. And on the zipper of that black bag, a single fingerprint belonging to the defendant. Now, as the plaintiff in today's case, we bear the burden of proof. We must show you that it is more likely than not that it was the defendant, Drew Mars, who caused the death of Agatha Lee. We will meet this burden. $20 million, 2 pills, and 1 fingerprint. And at the end of today's trial, my co-counsel, Karai Razadi, will come before you and ask that you find the defendant, Drew Mars, liable. Thank you.
I apologize about that, everyone. My computer freaked out for a second, but I caught the whole speech. So just give me 1 second to get back on the desktop, and hopefully we won't have another problem.
Of course, Your Honor. Just let me know when you're ready for me to proceed.
Sorry about that. Yeah, my computer is being annoying. So give me 1 second and it should be fine.
Your Honor, while you're getting set up, permission to perform an audio check to make sure that you're able to hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. I'm currently on my phone. I'm trying to get back into the trial from my computer so that I don't have to listen to you on my phone, because I don't think it'll go as well. So just 1 moment. All right, I'm rejoining on the computer right.
Just so that all of the competitors know, we will extend the all lost time to cover that period.
All right, my apologies about that. We can have the defense opening.
Yes, Your Honor. Before I proceed, just a quick moment to make sure, can you hear me all right? Excellent. Members of the jury, Agatha Lee was murdered. The murderer is in this courtroom, but the plaintiff, well, they've got the wrong facts and they're telling the wrong story, because the person who killed Agatha Lee was someone who was running out of money, someone who was running out of time. You see, it's June 2018, and the plaintiff has just spent the last nearly a decade traveling the world, living it up, brushing shoulders with celebrities. But now the trust fund that her parents left her has just run out. All she has left are her watch and her car, and pretty soon those are going to be gone too. To make matters worse, her multi-millionaire grandmother, Agatha Lee, has just written to her to tell her that she's out of the will and been replaced by a simple caretaker. The plaintiff is running out of money and she's running out of time. So she hatches a plan. See, the plaintiff is going to find her grandmother. She's going to pay $10,000 to do it. And when she does, she's going to get back into her good graces and make sure that she gets all of the nearly $20 million from that will, no matter what. Now, we're going to hear the plaintiff's story. And it's true. The plaintiff and her grandmother were getting along well as the summer went on. But that just wasn't enough. Because not a single person besides the plaintiff will ever come before you and say that Agatha Lee actually made the plaintiff her heir once again. Every other witness who actually spoke to Agatha Lee on the day of her death will tell you the same thing. She wouldn't do what the plaintiff wanted. She wouldn't put her back in the will. The plaintiff was about to run out of money and run out of time, but she had one way to make sure that she still got that over $20 million. Here in Midlands, we have something called the Slayer statute. And what that means is very simple. If you kill someone, or if you're found liable in a court of law for killing someone, then you can't inherit any of their money. So if Ms. Mars, my client, if she's found liable in court today, she doesn't get any of the inheritance from Agatha Lee. The person who does is the plaintiff. And that's exactly why, that's the real reason that the plaintiff is suing my client today, so she can get that over $20 million all to herself. But the plaintiff has to do something for her to be able to put this plan into action. Agatha Lee has to die, and the plaintiff has to be blamed. I'm sorry, the defendant has to be blamed. We're going to hear that moments after that conversation where the defendant was told that under no circumstances would the plaintiff be getting any money from Agatha Lee, that the plaintiff was left alone in the house for hours. Hours in which she had time to go to Agatha Lee's room and switch out her arthritis medication for a drug called chlorandramine. Now, for you and me and almost everyone else, chlorandramine is a simple heartburn medication. But it's a heartburn medication that Agatha Lee was deathly allergic to. And from there, it was a simple matter for the plaintiff to walk into my client's unlocked room and plant the chlorandramine there so that she would make sure that after Agatha Lee died, Drew Mars would be blamed. And then the plaintiff wouldn't have to worry about running out of money for a long, long time. You might be thinking, members of the jury, that what I've just told you sounds awfully similar to what the plaintiff has told you. But there's one key difference that you have to keep in mind between us and them. We don't have a burden in today's case. The plaintiff, and only the plaintiff, has to prove not only that my client is liable, but they have to prove that their theory of the case is more likely than all other possible explanations of the facts combined. And if they're not able to do that, then you must find Miss Mars not liable. That burden that the plaintiff has is one that they will fail to meet. And it's because that the plaintiff will fail to meet that burden, because it was the plaintiff and not my client who was running out of money and running out of time, that at the end of this trial, my co-counsel, Brandon Benjamin, will come before you and ask you to find Drew Mars not liable. Thank you.
Thank you, Counselor. Would the plaintiff like to call their first witness?
Yes, Your Honor. The plaintiff calls Stevie Rogers.
All right.
May I proceed?
You may proceed whenever.
Could you please introduce yourself to the members of the jury?
Hi, good morning. I'm Stevie Rogers.
And where do you live, Miss Rogers?
I live in Midlands. I've had an apartment here ever since my grandmother passed away.
What do you do for work?
I'm a writer. I'm actually a writer because of my grandmother. I've been working on some thrillers lately, but having a bout of writer's block, so I'm hoping it'll subside soon.
Miss Rogers, who is Miss Agatha Lee to you?
She was my grandmother, my mother's mother.
Were you close?
Yes, we were very, very close.
Could you talk a little bit more about your relationship?
Yes, she was the only grandparent I'd ever known, and we spent a lot of time together when I was young. I think I'd spent almost as much time with her when I was young as I did with my own parents. I was with her on summer breaks, on vacations, on weekends, and even when I was in college, I would go see her over Christmas break and spring break, and she's the entire reason I'm an author today.
Did you remain close as you got older?
Yes, we were very close until my junior year of college at Sawyer University.
What happened that year?
My parents died in a car crash on the 4th of July that year. And after that, it was just very hard to talk to my grandma. I mean, she looked and just reminded me so much of my parents that I couldn't talk to her or see her without it bringing back all these memories of my parents.
Did you ever end up reconnecting with your grandma?
Yes. In 2018, it had been 10 years since my parents had passed, and I hadn't seen any family, and I just really needed to be near some. So I mustered up the courage and I went to go see her that summer.
So when did you come to start living with your grandma?
I went to Midlands in early July of 2018. I went to live with her at her house, Lee Manor in Midlands.
Was it just you and your grandma living there?
No, it was the two of us and her in-home caretaker, Miss Drew Mars, the defendant.
So how was your relationship with your grandma now that you two were living together again?
It was wonderful. Just once we got talking about writing and playing backgammon, it was as if no time had ever passed and we just reconnected instantly.
So Steve, I want to talk to you about your grandma's will that was written in 2008. Do you know who the beneficiary was?
Yes, it was me.
Did you have any involvement in putting this will together?
No, I didn't.
Did you ask to be put in the will?
No, of course not.
Are you aware of any changes that were made to the will after 2008?
Yes, a while ago, Nana told me that she'd be changing the will in a letter.
How'd you feel about that change?
I mean, I wasn't thrilled at the time, but I didn't make much of it. I mean, it was her life and her estate, so I understood.
Ms. Rogers, I want to turn your attention to the defendant in today's case. Who's Drew Mars?
He lived with my grandmother at her house at Lee Manor, and he took care of all of her medical needs.
Do you know how long the defendant was living with your grandma?
Yes, so I know that he'd been living with her ever since she lived in Monroeville, Alabama. So for the last 10 years, I want to say.
Ms. Rogers, do you know what chloroandramine is?
Yes, Drew mentioned it to me once.
What do you mean by that?
Well, so I was just there at Lee Manor one day, and then Drew told me that even if Nana took one pill of chloroandramine, that she would die instantly.
So, Ms. Rogers, I want to talk to you about August 14th, 2018. Did you see your grandma that day?
Yes, I woke up that morning, I had breakfast, and then my grandmother called me into her study that day. And she was just telling me how glad she was that we got to reconnect. And I told her I felt the same way to reading books and playing backgammon. And I was just thrilled to be there.
Did she say anything else to you?
Yes, she told me that she was rewriting her will again to leave everything to me and how she'd be calling her lawyer soon after to, I guess, formalize it and whatnot.
What do you mean by rewrite her will?
So a while ago when she changed her will, she had put Drew Mars in it, but she was rewriting it to make me the sole beneficiary.
Did she say why?
She was just very, very happy that we got to reconnecting, and she wanted to make sure that I was taken care of. It was just like her, always making sure the people around her were safe and taken care of, and thinking about others.
Ms. Rogers, what happened after your conversation with your grandmother?
She had an appointment with her biographer that day, Ryan Cabrera. So we hugged, and then she left for lunch. Sorry. But when I walked out, I saw the defendant against the door. It was very weird.
What do you mean?
Well, so I walked out, and it was as if he had been listening because he was right up against the door, and he looked incredibly angry. His fists were clenched, and he just looked crazy angry. And then he said something to me. He said, "No way."
Ms. Rogers, what happened later that night?
So we actually watched a movie. We watched Gone Girl that afternoon, my grandmother and me, and then we had an early dinner, and I was just about to head downstairs.
Did you do anything else that evening?
No, I was just walking down the stairs when I saw the defendant.
Could you see what she was doing?
Yes, she was walking from her own room into Nana's room. And it seemed as if she was holding something.
Objection, Your Honor, speculation.
Response, Your Honor?
Yes.
Your Honor, the testimony elicited from the witness was that it appeared as if she was holding something. Ms. Rogers is certainly free to testify about her own rational perception, and that was what she just did.
Your Honor, may I be heard?
You may.
Your Honor, our objection isn't to whether or not Miss Marge was holding something, but rather to the fact that she was walking into Miss Lee's room. We haven't heard any foundation as to how she knows she was walking into Miss Lee's room. There's several rooms on the second floor. And before that foundation is laid, this is both speculation and a lack of foundation.
Response, Your Honor?
Last word.
Your Honor, we've heard testimony that Ms. Rogers lived at Lee Manor for several weeks. She's certainly familiar with the layout of that home, and she's certainly qualified to testify what room the defendant was walking into at that time.
I'm going to overrule the objection. I think it's a matter that can be covered on cross-examination, how certain she is about what room this person was heading into. So overruled.
So, Ms. Rogers, just for clarity, I'll re-ask the question. Did you see what the defendant was doing at that time?
Yes, he was walking in the direction of my grandmother's room, and it looked as if he was holding something.
Did you notice anything else?
Yes, so he was walking, and his right hand had his palm open, but his fingers closed as if there was something in it.
And Ms. Rogers, what time did you see the defendant walking into your grandma's room?
I had left her study around 9:30, so it couldn't have been more than a few minutes after.
Ms. Rogers, are you familiar with your grandmother's autopsy report?
I am.
Would you recognize it if I showed it to you today in court?
I would.
Your Honor, at this time, permission to display Exhibit 2, as it has already been entered prior to today's hearing.
Any objection?
No objections, Your Honor.
Granted.
So, Ms. Rogers, according to this autopsy report, around what time did your grandmother ingest chlorambutamine?
My grandma ingested the pills between 9 p.m. and 3 a.m. on August 15th. So after I had left her and around the time I saw Drew Mars.
Thank you, Ms. Rogers. Just one final question. The next morning on August 15th, what happened?
Well, I woke up around 8:30 that day, and I just remember Drew Mars banging on my door, and he told me that my grandma had died. I couldn't believe it. She was so healthy, and we were just talking the night before, and she was all I had left, and I couldn't believe it.
Thank you, Ms. Rogers. Nothing further.
Thank you, Counselor. Cross-examination.
Yes, Your Honor. May I proceed?
You may.
Good morning, Ms. Rogers. My name is Brandon Benjamin. I'm just going to be asking you a few questions on behalf of the defense, okay?
Okay.
Now, I want to start by talking about why you really showed up to Lee Manor in 2018. Now, as you told us, sorry, man, keep going.
I hadn't been around any family, and I want to see my grandmother after so many years. And I think at that point, I was finally ready to not have it bring up memories of my parents at that point.
Well, man, we'll get there in a second, but you showed up to Lee Manor in July, right?
Yes.
And at that time, you hadn't seen your grandmother in quite a while.
No, I just couldn't bear to see her all those years.
Man, it's been about 7 years since you'd seen her, right?
Yes, I think that's right.
When you showed up to her house, you were pretty desperate.
Yes, I just need to be around somebody, and I miss my parents so much at that point.
Well, ma'am, you weren't just desperate because you missed social interaction. You were desperate because you only had $2,000 in your bank account. Is that right?
Yes, but I had my car and a few nice watches, and I was working on my novel, so I I wasn't super desperate. I wasn't that worried about it.
Ms. Rogers, was that a yes or a no to my question? You only had $2,000 in your account.
Yes, that was what was in my savings at that point.
And ma'am, when your parents died, they actually left you a trust fund, correct?
Yes.
But in 2018, well, you had spent all of that trust fund.
I had.
And just a few months before, you found out that your grandmother was taking you out of her will. Did I get that right?
Yeah. Yes.
Ma'am, so just so we're getting this straight, it was after you were down to just $2,000 that you showed up to Lee Manor.
No, it was a while after. Like I said, that July was the 10th anniversary of my parents' death, and that was when I just made the decision to go down there and see her.
Ma'am, that wasn't quite my question. It was after you were down to just $2,000 in your account that you showed up to Agatha Lee's doorstep, right?
Yes, it was some point after.
And it was after your trust fund ran out that you showed up to Lee Manor.
Yes, it happened before, I guess.
Ma'am, it was after your grandmother took you out of her will that you finally saw her for the first time in 7 years. Is that right?
Yes.
So, ma'am, let's talk about what you and your grandmother discussed after you moved back in. Now, as you told us on direct examination, you were trying to rekindle your relationship with her, right?
Yes, I'm so glad we got to in those couple of months.
That's right. In those couple of months, you played backgammon like you used to.
Yes, but I do have a confession. I believe she let me win a lot more times than I would have liked to.
But ma'am, you weren't just there to play backgammon with your grandmother, were you?
No, I was there to catch up and talk about writing and just, I guess, catch up on all those years that we lost, that I couldn't muster up the courage to see her.
And ma'am, you were also there to get back into her will, right?
No.
But on August 14th, you and Agatha did have a discussion about her will.
Yes, she called me into her room or her study that day, and she wanted to talk about it.
That's right. You two sat down in her study and you spoke about her will.
Yes, we did. And she was just really happy with the way that things had been going at that point.
Ma'am, Agatha Lee actually told you, I'm not putting you back in, right?
No, that's not what happened at all.
Ma'am, she told you she was still...
Yes, Your Honor, hearsay.
Response.
Yes, Your Honor. We're not offering this statement for the truth of the matter. We don't actually know what Agatha Lee was intending. Rather or not, we're offering it for the effect that it had on the listener. In this case, Miss Rogers.
Response, Your Honor?
Yep.
Yes, Your Honor. The defense is offering this statement for the truth of the matter that Miss Agatha Lee did intend to remove Miss Rogers from the will and is therefore hearsay.
Anything further?
Yes, Your Honor. Again, we're not offering this for the truth. We don't know what Agatha Lee's actual intentions were, and we never will. All we care about is what effect this had on Miss Rogers and how it led her to act in the following hours.
And what is your belief as to what effect that's going to show?
Your Honor, if I may make an offer of proof.
You may.
After hearing this statement, Miss Rogers is going to then plant the pills inside of Miss Lee's pill case and inside of Miss Mars's closet. This is the motive for her in today's case.
I'm going to overrule the objection. The arguments are well taken. I'm going to overrule the objection.
Yes, Your Honor.
So Miss Rogers, Miss Lee actually told you she wasn't putting you back into the will.
No, that's quite the opposite of what happened. She told me that after the way things were going, she wanted to make sure I was taken care of, and she was really happy at the way that we had gotten to talking again, and then how I was back in her life.
Well, Miss Rogers, you keep saying no to this, but that conversation you had in the study, well, it wasn't recorded, right?
No, I don't usually record what happens between my family and me.
Ma'am, as far as you know, it was just you and Miss Lee inside the room, right?
Yes, it was just us two inside the room, and I believe that Drew Mars was eavesdropping outside.
Ma'am, was that a yes to my question?
I'm sorry, could you repeat the question again?
It was just you two inside the room, as far as you believed.
Yes, it was just us in her study.
Ma'am, this conversation, it wasn't written down, right? There's no written transcripts of it?
No.
So the only proof that you've brought today that your grandmother was putting you back into her will, that's your word, right?
Yes, that's what happened.
Let's talk about what happened the morning after you two had this conversation. Because the next morning, Drew Mars comes into your room, right?
Yes, with the worst news I could ever hear.
She told you your grandmother had passed.
Yes, I just couldn't believe it. She was so fine the night before. She was healthy. We were talking and laughing.
A few minutes later, the police showed up, right?
Yes, that morning.
And then you insisted that the police run a toxicology report. Did I get that right?
Yes, there's just no way that my grandmother could have died. She was perfectly healthy and she had recovered from a heart attack. She was absolutely fine.
That's right, man. The reason you insisted for a toxicology report is because you believe Drew Mars poisoned your grandmother.
Yes, it had to have been Drew. She was never happy with the fact that I was there. She was just really insecure about it. It made sense.
Was that a yes to my question?
Yes.
Ma'am, you believed it was Drew Mars, and so you insisted that the cops run another toxicology report after you asked them the first time, right?
Yes, because they hadn't done it the first time.
That's right, because they told you they didn't suspect poison.
They just took light of the fact that my grandmother was old and they just weren't doing their due diligence.
Was that a yes to my question?
Yes.
In fact, ma'am, nobody in that room had said anything about poison when you asked for a toxicology report.
No, but it was the police and Drew Mars.
Ma'am, the reason you asked for a toxicology report is because, in your own words, you already knew what it was going to say.
Had to have been Drew. Drew told me that those pills could have poisoned her, and she was the one who even knew where to get them, so it had to have been her.
Ma'am, was that a yes to my question?
Yes.
Let's talk about how you knew exactly what the toxicology report was going to say. Now, ma'am, after that conversation in the study with your grandmother, she left, right?
Yes.
And you
Yes. She left to go to lunch.
And you were home, right?
Yes.
You were home alone.
Yes. I was just having a nice quiet afternoon that day.
And that nice quiet afternoon, you had access to the whole house, right?
I guess so. Yes.
You had access to the first floor.
Yes. It wasn't locked to the entire first floor.
And to the bedrooms on the second floor.
Yes.
Ma'am, you knew where your grandmother's pills were kept.
Yes, somewhere in her room, I would assume.
You knew what time she took them every night.
Before she went to bed, yes.
Ma'am, you know that Miss Mars died from an allergic reaction to chlorandramine, right?
Yes, that's what the report showed.
And you knew that chlorandramine, just 2 pills of those could kill her, right?
Yes, Drew had told me that. He just brought it up one day in conversation. It was really odd that she did that.
Ma'am, was that a yes or a no to my question?
Yes.
And ma'am, you also know something about the Slayer statute, right?
Yes, I'd heard of it in law school.
And ma'am, to your belief, the Slayer statute says that if someone is found liable for killing someone, they can't inherit any of their money.
Yes, I think that's a reasonable statute.
So you know that if Drew Mars is found liable today, she wouldn't get any of Agatha's will.
No.
If Drew Mars is found liable, you would inherit her estate, right?
Yes, because Drew Mars killed my grandmother.
If Drew Mars is found liable, you would inherit her book royalties.
I'm sorry, could you repeat that?
If Drew Mars is found liable, you would inherit her book royalties.
Yes.
Miss Rogers, if Miss Drew Mars is found liable, you would inherit a sum of over $20 million. Did I get that right?
Yes, I think so.
Thank you, Ms. Rogers. Your Honor, I have nothing further.
Apologies, Your Honor.
Any redirect?
No redirect, Your Honor. I just ask that Ms. Rogers be allowed to retake her seat.
Thank you for your testimony, Ms. Rogers. Next witness?
Yes, Your Honor, the plaintiff calls Detective Bond. May I proceed, Your Honor?
You may.
Good afternoon, sir. Could you please introduce yourself to the members of the jury?
Good afternoon. My name is Marty Bond.
Mr. Bond, what do you do for a living?
Well, I'm a PI, private investigator, that is here in Midlands, along with numerous other states.
What do you do as a private investigator?
Essentially, I solve mysteries that common folk cannot, whether that be finding a missing person or proving a case of infidelity. However, my most high-profile cases include such things as murder, robbery, and kidnapping. I've quite literally seen and solved it all.
Detective Bond, how did you get into that field?
I like to think it's my own intuition. Even as a young man, I found myself cracking cases. I'll never forget my first. Age 4, case of the missing biscuits from the pantry. The culprit, my brother, age 3. I guess you can say it comes naturally for me.
Have you received any certifications in your field?
Of course, I have my private investigator's license here in Midlands, along with some other states and some other countries. I also have years and years of experience, along with dozens of crack cases.
How did you become involved with this case in particular?
I was hired by Miss Stevie Rogers to assist in the investigation of her grandmother's murder, Agatha Lee, the Agatha Lee.
How did you first meet Stevie Rogers?
I was first contacted by Stevie on June 5th of 2018. She requested a rather simple task, help find her grandmother. I returned to Stevie Rogers within 2 days with her grandmother's address in Midlands, and she paid me in cash for my work. At that point in time, I truly thought the matter to be closed, and I didn't really expect a follow-up from Stevie.
Were you ever contacted by Miss Rogers again?
Yes, I was. On August 15th of 2018 at 8:45 a.m., I got a call from Stevie Rogers.
Why'd she call?
Well, I picked up the phone to learn that Stevie Rogers' grandmother, Miss Lee, had been murdered. Stevie wanted me on the scene. Being the punctual man I am, I arrived at Miss Lee's manor at 9:25 a.m.
What happened when you arrived at Miss Lee's house that day?
I went through the unlocked door, found my way to Miss Lee's room, and there I saw Stevie Rogers, the in-home caretaker, Drew Mars, and poor Miss Lee, dead on the bed.
Mr. Bond, were there any police when you arrived at the house?
No, not when I arrived. I beat the fuzz, so to speak, but about 5 minutes later, 9:30 a.m., Detective Nora Khan from the Midland State Police Department arrived at the scene.
And what did the detective do when she arrived?
Well, Detective Khan, understandably, asked Stevie and I to leave the room so she could talk with the caretaker, Drew Mars.
And what did you do during that time, sir?
During that time, I decided to put the I in PI and do a little investigating myself. This led me to Drew Mars's computer on her bed, which I cracked her passcode in 4 tries and began sifting through her emails looking for anything pertaining to Miss Lee's death.
Did you find any useful information on that computer?
Indeed, I did. I found an email of interest dated back to February 1st of 2018. That's a full 8 months before Miss Lee's death.
Would you recognize a copy of it if I were to show it to you today?
Yes, I would.
Your Honor, permission to display Exhibit 13 to the witness.
Any objection from the defense?
No objection to its display, Your Honor.
Okay. Granted.
Now, Detective Bond, what am I showing you here?
This is a picture of the email I took that day.
Is it a fair and accurate representation of that email?
Looks to be to me.
Your Honor, the plaintiff moves Exhibit 13 into evidence.
Without objection, Your Honor.
Received without objection.
So Detective Bond, what did this email say?
Well, besides the colorful subject line, Drew Mars explains that she has moved into Miss Lee's will, meaning if Miss Lee dies, Drew Mars was set to inherit everything Miss Lee owned, being the house, cash, automobiles, absolutely everything. Drew ends this email by saying, and I quote, "This is going to totally change my life."
Now, did you speak with Miss Mars on that day?
I did, very briefly. I ran into Miss Mars outside of her bedroom, and in that short period of time, she let me know that Miss Lee had an acute allergy to chloroandramine.
Mr. Bond, could you tell us what chloroandramine is?
Chloroandramine is an OTC heartburn medication. So you can buy it over the counter at any store, whatever pharmacy, but for Miss Lee, it's poison.
Objection, Your Honor. Lack of foundation as to it can be bought at any store.
Response.
Yes, Your Honor. We've already stipulated that chloroandramine is readily available at any local pharmacy.
May I be heard, Your Honor?
You may.
We've stipulated it is available at multiple local pharmacies. However, we've only stipulated to its availability at 15. We certainly haven't stipulated to its availability at every local pharmacy, and it's not something that this witness can testify to.
Anything further on that?
Yes, Your Honor. The stipulation says that it's commonly available at more than 15 local pharmacies and online. The witness is just testifying that this is a commonly available drug.
I'm going to overrule the objection, but I'll offer a limiting instruction to the jury to consider only the stipulated information about the drug's availability. They can decide what it's worth.
So Detective Bond, what did you say chloroandramine was?
It's this OTC heartburn medication that can be found at most stores as it is over the counter. But as I said, to Miss Lee, it's poison.
Did you talk to Miss Mars about anything else at that time?
I did ask if I would be able to search her room. However, she declined my request.
So what was the next step in your investigation?
I asked Detective Khan to perform a toxicology screen on Miss Lee's body in order to reveal any sort of poisons or chemicals in Miss Lee's body.
Was that toxicology screen eventually performed?
Not at first, but after Miss Lee's will reading, that changed.
What happened at the will reading?
Well, it was revealed to the public that Drew Mars was the sole inheritor of Miss Lee's entire estate.
Detective Bond, would you recognize a copy of the autopsy if I were to show it to you today?
I would, Counselor.
Your Honor, permission to display Exhibit 2, which has already been entered into evidence?
Any objection?
No objection, Your Honor, as it's been already admitted.
Granted.
Do you recognize what I've put up on the screen, sir?
Yes, I do.
What is it?
This is the autopsy of Miss Lee.
And what did this report say about the results of the toxicology screen?
Well, in the section highlighted there, you can see that chloroandramine was in fact found in Miss Lee's bloodstream, as I suspected.
And how does the autopsy say that Miss Lee died?
Miss Lee did in fact die from chloroandramine, the same drug Drew Mars told me about.
Now, were any chloroandramine pills found at the crime scene?
They were. Although I was personally denied access to Drew Mars's room, Detective Khan was not, after a warrant, of course. She searched the room and I spectated. That's where they were found.
Where exactly in Miss Mars' bedroom were the chloroandramine pills found?
In her bedroom, Miss Mars's bedroom, there's a closet. And in that closet, there was a small black bag. And in that small black bag, there was a pill bottle. That's where the chloroandramine was.
Was there anything notable about that bag found in Miss Mars's room?
Yes, there was. The only forensic evidence found on that bag was a single fingerprint on the zipper.
Detective Bond, can you tell us whose fingerprint was found on that black bag containing chloroandramine?
That fingerprint belonged to Drew Mars.
Thank you, Detective Bond. No further questions, Your Honor.
Thank you. Cross-examination.
Yes, Your Honor, just a moment. Can everyone hear me all right?
Yes,
Yes.
May I begin?
you may proceed.
Good morning, Detective. My name's Brennan Bartley. I just have a couple questions I need to ask you on behalf of the defense, all right?
Of course.
I want to start by making sure the jury has some context for your testimony today.
Of
You were
course.
hired by the plaintiff in this case, right?
That's correct, to assist in the investigation of Miss Lee's murder.
This wasn't the first time you'd been hired by the plaintiff, was it?
No, I was also contracted to search out for Miss Lee's new location. As I'm the best in the business, high-profile people usually seek my service out.
And because you're the best in the business, well, the plaintiff paid you $10,000 cash for finding her grandmother.
That's correct. And although I could have sold that location of Agatha Lee to the tabloids for a lot more money, I respect family.
Sir, was that a yes or a no to my question?
That was a yes.
For this case, where you're investigating the death of Agatha Lee, she paid you a total of $25,000, right?
Yes, that is correct.
So in total, in 2018, the plaintiff paid you $35,000. Do I have that
Yes.
right?
Yes, for my work, and that's almost at a discount.
Well, then I want to move on to what you can and can't tell us about how Agatha Lee died.
Of course, that's what I'm here to do.
You're aware that a bottle of chloroandramine was found in Drew Mars's bedroom.
That's correct, in the small black bag with the one forensic evidence pointing to Drew Mars.
Now, you agree with me, sir, there aren't any fingerprints on that bottle of chloroandramine, are there?
No, the only fingerprints on that bag were found on the zipper.
So because there aren't any fingerprints on it, can you tell us who actually purchased that bottle of chloroandramine?
I cannot certainly tell you, although I do believe it was Drew Mars.
I'm not asking for what you believe, sir. I'm asking for what you know. Was that a yes or a no to my question?
I could not say for certain.
You can't tell us who purchased that bottle of chloroandramine.
I cannot say for certain.
You can't tell us when that bottle of chloroandramine was purchased.
The bottle of chloroandramine contained no date, so no, I could not.
You can't tell us where that bottle of chloroandramine was purchased.
No, however, I am aware that there are about 15 or more pharmacies in Midlands that carry the OTC drug chloroandramine.
But you can't tell us which one it came from, can you?
Not exactly.
Now, that bottle of chloroandramine, you didn't actually see when it was placed in Miss Mars's bedroom, did you?
I was not there when it was placed in Miss Mars's bedroom, no.
So it's fair to say that you don't know when that bottle of chloroandramine first appeared in Miss Mars's bedroom.
That's true. I cannot say for certain.
Now, you of course also weren't present in Miss Lee's room before she died, were you?
Of course not. As a detective, I usually show up after the crime happens.
And because you show up after the crime happens, you can't tell us who provided Miss Lee with the chloroandramine that killed her.
I cannot, however, the evidence does point towards Drew Mars, as there were 2 fingerprints on 2 Winterin pills in her Winterin case, as those were removed from the pill divider and replaced with the chloroandramine.
Your Honor, motion to strike everything after I cannot as non-responsive.
Response.
Yes, Your Honor. The witness was responding to opposing counsel's question. He didn't specify as a yes or no answer. The witness felt that that was a necessary component of the answer for the jury to understand the context.
May I be heard, Your Honor?
Last word.
Your Honor, if opposing counsel thinks that context is necessary, he's free to do so on redirect examination. I asked if this witness could tell us who actually who actually provided the pills to Miss Lee. He said he cannot. That answers the question.
Your Honor, if I may, one last time.
Sure.
The question was whether or not he could tell us who purchased those pills, who put those pills in that bag. The witness gave us evidence that says that he can give us a direction as to who did it. Now, that information answers opposing counsel's question directly.
I'm going to overrule the objection. The witness's answer will stand, but I'll admonish the witness to keep their answers tailored to the question that's asked.
And detective, you weren't at Miss Mars's room when the bottle of chloroandramine, you didn't see who placed the bottle of chloroandramine in Miss Mars's room, did you?
I did not.
So because you didn't see who placed the bottle of chloroandramine there, you'd agree it's possible that it was placed there by someone other than Drew Mars.
That could be a possibility. However, I believe it's highly unlikely, but yes.
Sir, was that a yes or a no to the question I was asking?
That was a yes.
So then, with that in mind, I want to talk to you about whether or not Miss Mars actually had a motive to kill Agatha Lee.
Okay.
Now, one of the things you tried to find out as the course of your investigation was whether or not Miss Mars believed she was about to be written out of the will, right?
Yes, that's why I sifted through emails.
To be clear, you never found any documents that said that the plaintiff, your client, was about to be named heir.
I did not, although I trust Stevie's word.
We'll get to what you trust and don't trust in a moment, sir. But for right now, I'm just talking about documents. You didn't find any documents saying that the plaintiff was about to be named heir. Yes or no?
No, there were no documents.
Miss Mars didn't tell you that she was aware of any such document. Yes or no?
No, she was not aware of any such document.
No one in this case told you they were aware of any such document saying the plaintiff, your client, was about to be named heir.
Not that I have heard, no.
Miss Mars didn't tell you that she'd overheard a conversation where your client was named heir?
No, she did not.
The only person who told you that there was ever a conversation where the plaintiff, your client, was named heir was your client.
Yes, that's true. She told me about the conversation she had with Miss Lee in her study that day before she died.
The only person who told you that Miss Mars had overheard that conversation, that was your client too.
Excuse me, could you repeat that? I'm sorry.
Of course, sir. The only person who told you Miss Mars had overheard that conversation, that was your client too.
Yes, if you're referring to Miss Mars being outside of the study when that conversation took place, then yes.
I want to loop back to something you mentioned a minute ago. You said that you trust Stevie's word. Wouldn't you agree with me, sir, in your own words, the first rule of detection is to trust no one?
That is correct. However, I ruled things out as well.
Sir, was that a yes or a no?
That is a yes.
Thank you, Detective.
Thank
Your
you.
Honor, nothing further.
Thank you. Any redirect?
Yes, Your Honor. Brief redirect examination.
All right,
May I proceed?
you may.
Now, Detective Bond, Mr. Bartley asked you a lot about the pills and the bag. Could you tell us if there are any other fingerprints found on the bag aside from Drew Mars's fingerprint?
Yes, as I briefly mentioned, two fingerprints were found on, or fingerprint was found on two pills of Winterin in Miss Lee's bathroom. None of the other pills in that container had any sort of prints, and we believe two pills of Winterin in Miss Lee's pill divider were replaced with the chloroandramine.
Objection, Your Honor. Speculation. May I be heard?
You may.
The witness just testified as to we believe two Winterin pills were replaced in that pill divider. That's simply not something the witness can testify to. He is speculating. He's talking about his belief.
May I respond, Your Honor?
You may.
This is of a witness, a rationally based perception of the witness. This witness testified that there were two fingerprints found on pills that were placed inside of the original bottle of arthritis medication. Meaning that those pills must have been taken out of the bottle, been touched, and put back into the bottle. Being replaced back into the bottle is a rationally based perception by this witness.
May I be heard, Your Honor?
You may.
The witness can testify that there were fingerprints on the pills inside that bottle, but he cannot testify as to how those fingerprints got there because he simply can't know. Did someone accidentally touch the pills while they were inside the bottle? Did someone spill the pills outside of the bottle and then put some of them back in? He doesn't know. He doesn't know how those pills got those fingerprints on them, and he doesn't know whether or not the chlorandramine pills were actually switched with the Winterine pills or if they came some other way. This is speculation.
No, overrule the objection. I don't think the witness can speculate to his own opinion. I do see perhaps an issue with foundation as to how he came to that opinion, but the witness is entitled to elucidate his own belief. I will not allow the witness to attribute that opinion to someone else. The witness said we don't know who that we was. So I'm going to overrule the objection, admonish the witness to be clear about whose opinion he's talking about and what it's based on.
Now, Detective Bond, were Stevie Rogers' fingerprints ever found on the black bag that contained chlorandramine?
They were not.
Was there any chlorandramine ever found inside of Miss Rogers' room?
No, there was not.
Was there any evidence to suggest that Miss Rogers ever purchased that chlorandramine?
No, I have seen no such evidence.
Well, Detective Bond, was there any evidence that Drew Mars had the opportunity to purchase that chlorandramine?
There was potential evidence that she went to the pharmacy the day before Miss Lee died, yes, but there's no receipt, no video of that.
Lack of foundation. May I be heard?
You may.
There's a lack of foundation as to what this potential evidence is or how this witness gained access to that information.
Your Honor, may I respond?
Response.
This witness just testified that there's potential evidence that Drew Mars purchased chlorandramine because Drew Mars went to a pharmacy the day before Miss Lee died. We've already established that chlorandramine is commonly available at many pharmacies throughout Midlands. And further, pursuant to Stipulation 21, Detective Bond is allowed to testify to the contents of the police report.
May I be heard, Your Honor?
You may.
The witness can testify that there's, we agree, the witness can testify that there's chlorandramine available throughout Midlands, but he can't testify that Miss Mars may have gone to a pharmacy or may not have, unless it's established how he was able to perceive that and know that. That hasn't been established. That foundation is lacking. And without that foundation, it's not admissible.
May I respond, Your Honor?
Yeah.
Prior to today's trial, the two parties stipulated, it's Stipulation 21, if you want to take a look at it, Your Honor, that Detective Bond may testify to the contents of Exhibit 6. Now, Exhibit 6 is the entire police report, which has been pre-admitted into evidence. If you want to take a look at that police report, it'll tell you exactly what Mr. Bond is testifying to, that Drew Mars admitted going to a pharmacy the day before Agatha Lee died.
May I be heard, Your Honor?
Yep.
The foundation for what this evidence is that suggests not that my client went to a pharmacy, but that my client may have purchased chlorandramine, the foundation for what that evidence is that this witness talked about hasn't been established. If they want to ask this witness how he knows that, what he reviewed, what questions were asked, he can try to lay that foundation. But at this point, saying there might be some evidence she purchased chlorandramine, there's a lack of foundation for it. And at this point, it's substantially more prejudicial than probative.
Your Honor, final response here?
No, I'm going to rule. I'm going to sustain the objection. I think you do need to lay a little bit more foundation on this issue as to whether this witness actually knows if that evidence exists, whether it's his opinion only that it possibly exists, and what he's basing that opinion on. I think we need to hear a little bit more of that foundation.
Yes, Your Honor.
Motion to strike, Your Honor.
Stricken until the foundation is laid.
Now, Detective Bond, are you familiar with the police's investigation?
Yes, I am familiar with Detective Khan's report.
Are you aware if during that investigation there was any evidence that Miss Mars went to a pharmacy?
Yes, she told Detective Nora Khan that she went to a pharmacy that day before Miss Lee died.
Thank you, Mr. Bond. No further questions, Your Honor.
All right.
No recross, Your Honor.
Okay. Can this witness be excused?
Thank you.
All right. Thank you for your testimony, Mr. Bond. Anything further from the plaintiff?
No, Your Honor. With that, the plaintiff rests at case in chief and requests a brief 5-minute recess before the defense's case in chief, time permitting.
How's the defense feel about 5 minutes?
5 minutes sounds great to us, Your Honor.
All right. Are you, I can't see your timekeepers. I don't know who's keeping time. I don't actually even know when all loss is, unless it was put in the chat, in which case I totally ignored it, which might be my fault. If somebody could put all loss in the chat, that would be great. And we'll take 5 minutes.
I believe, Your Honor, all loss is going to be shortly after what would be 11:03 Pacific time, so 2:03 Eastern time. Given that there was that technical delay that won't be counted towards all loss, it's possible it will be a couple minutes beyond that.
So approximately 11:05 Pacific time, maybe?
Approximately.
All right. Great. 5 minutes.
Thank you.
Competitors, as you return, if you could mute your video for me. And judges, if you could all please unmute your video just so that I see that you're all here. So competitors, if you guys could go on mute for me, I just want the judges to be unmuted. Thanks. Brennan, if you could mute your video, please. Thank you. Looks like we're waiting for one more judge. Judge Donnellan, if you're there, can you please unmute your video just so that we know you've returned? Judge Donnellan, if you are hearing me or seeing me, if you could turn on your video or send a message to the private chat, just so that we all know that you are back from break. We'll give him another minute or two. Thanks everyone for your patience. Judge Donnellan, I'm going to ask again if you can hear me, if you can unmute yourself and just acknowledge that you have returned from break. Thanks a lot.
Judge Cantor, are we back yet?
Was that Judge Donnellan?
Yes, I went to the bathroom and locked myself out of my office, so I had to have a maintenance guy come up. I apologize if I'm a little late.
No, that's okay. You're back at your computer and you can see us now?
Yes.
Okay, fantastic.
Sorry
So,
about that.
no, that's okay. So thanks everybody for your patience. All of the scoring judges, you can go back on mute and you can mute your video. We have all of the judges. Judge Moore, if you just want to mute your video. Thank you very much. Judge Cantor, we're ready to proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Harper. Appreciate it. Is the defense ready to proceed with their case in chief?
Yes, Your Honor, we are.
All right.
At this time, the defense calls Drew Mars to the stand.
All right.
I'm not allowed to, it's not letting me open the video. It said that the host stopped the video.
Which individual was that?
Drew Mars.
You may proceed.
Good morning. Could you please introduce yourself to the members of the jury?
Good morning. My name is Andrea Marzayoun, but please call me Drew Mars, if that's okay.
That's all right, ma'am. Well, where are you from, Miss Mars?
I was born and raised in Beirut, in Lebanon, but I've been living here in the US for the past 15 years.
What do you do now that you live here in the US?
I'm a nurse and a professional caretaker.
Did you ever meet someone named Agatha Lee in the course of your job?
Yes, I worked for Miss Lee for over 10 years as her caretaker.
What were some of your duties as Miss Lee's caretaker?
Oh, well, I helped her however, she needed. I cooked for her, I cleaned for her, I fixed her medicine, whatever she needed, really.
Can you tell members of the jury what your relationship was like with Miss Lee?
Sure. I mean, we had a great relationship. She treated me like I was her family. You know what I mean? We talked together, we laughed together. She asked me to try some of my home recipes from Lebanon. So we had an amazing relationship. I wouldn't have stayed 10 years if that weren't the case.
Before you ask your question, Mr. Bartley, Ms. Mars, I believe we're getting a little bit of feedback from the audio through your microphone. So if you could turn down your volume just a little bit, that may help.
How about now? Is that better?
Well, we won't know until somebody else talks, but that sounds good. All right, please continue.
Am I frozen?
No, Mr. Bartley, now your microphone is no longer picking things up, so my solution may have not helped us.
The Zoom situation is interesting. Telehealth too, it's a nightmare.
No, Mr. Bartley, your microphone is not picking anything up currently.
Mr. Bartley, do you want to try to sign out of the room and come back? See if that fixes the issue?
In case you're all wondering, no, it is not better in real trials right now.
Are they even doing real trials?
Sometimes.
I'm a scoring judge. My wife actually is serving petit jury duty starting Monday.
Okay, Mr. Bartley is back.
Yes, can you guys hear me now?
I'm getting enough audio for it to work.
Okay, I'll try to just be as loud as I can.
There we go. That's perfect. You're good. Nobody messed with anything.
All right. Ms. Mars, can you tell us whether or not you and Ms. Lee ever discussed her will?
Yes. In 2018, she showed me her old will her new will and then a letter that she sent to Stevie.
When she showed you her new will, did you know who her new heir was?
Yes, it was me.
Before we go any further, Ms. Mars, I want to give you a chance to address the plaintiff's allegations directly. Did you poison Agatha Lee?
No, no, of course not. She was like my mother. I would never do anything to hurt her. Never.
Then with that in mind, I want to talk about what really happened. Did you ever meet the plaintiff in this case, Stevie Rogers?
Yes, a few times.
What was the plaintiff's relationship, or how often did the plaintiff visit Lee Manor?
Well, before 2011, maybe 2 or 3 times, but after that, I didn't see her until she came in 2018, in the summer.
In that time, you were able to tell if the plaintiff was communicating with Miss Lee.
Between 2011 and 2018, no, I mean, I never saw them talking on the phone, or I never, saw any mail from Stevie, so I don't think they spoke very often.
Ms. Mars, you said a moment ago that Stevie had come by in 2018. When exactly did the plaintiff come to Lee Manor?
It was July, beginning of July.
What was the plaintiff's relationship like with Miss Lee from July through August of 2018?
I mean, it seemed great, they spent a lot of time together, they watched movies, they ate together. It seemed like they were having a good relationship.
Do you know if the plaintiff ever asked Miss Lee about her will?
Yes, I do.
Can you tell us when and where exactly that was?
Sure. It was August 14th, the day Miss Lee died. I remember she asked me to go get her tea. So I made the tea. I was bringing it to her office. But before I went inside, I heard an argument.
What exactly was being said in this argument?
Stevie was saying, reconsider, please put me back in the will. She was just begging to be back in the will.
How did Miss Lee respond to the plaintiff begging to be put back in the will?
She said, I love you, but I will not give you a single more penny. Not now while I'm alive, and not after I'm gone.
Objection, Your Honor.
May I respond?
Was a hearsay objection, Counselor?
Yes, Your Honor, hearsay.
Right. Yeah, response.
Your Honor, this falls under an exception to the rule of hearsay, 8033, a then existing state of mind. Specifically, the earlier statements go to show Agatha Lee's plan, and the later statements relating to the will relate to the terms of the declarant's will, both of which fall under that hearsay exception.
Response?
Yes, Your Honor. The statement that she won't make a change doesn't go to her motive, intent, or plan. There's no intent to do anything. It's a lack of intent, if anything. That doesn't fall under 8033.
May I be heard, Your Honor?
Yes.
First, as far as it relates to the will, it is already automatically admissible under Rule 8033. If you go ahead and look at the last sentence of that rule, it specifically accepts statements relating to the terms of the declarant's will from the hearsay rule. Now, as for the rest of those statements, they do also still go to plan. She does not plan on giving the plaintiff any more money. She doesn't plan on doing it while she's alive. She doesn't plan on doing it while she's dead. It all falls under that rule.
Your Honor, may be heard.
Last word.
Rule 8033 specifically says that it's only valid if it relates to the belief or memory in terms of the will. It's not any statement about a will gets in under 8033. It says that it's to show not including a statement of memory or belief to prove the fact remembered or believed unless it relates to the validity or the terms of a will. This isn't a statement remembered or believed. This is a statement that Miss Lee is making to Miss Rogers. It certainly does not fall under that exception.
I think it's a clever argument, Mr. Rosati, but I'm going to overrule the objection. I think that this statement falls either under specifically the statements of will in 8033 or just generally a statement of intent under 8033. So the objection's overruled.
Ms. Mars, can you tell us what exactly did Agatha Lee say in response to the plaintiff begging her to be put back in the will?
Sure. She said, I love you.
Ms. Mars, I fear you may have cut out.
Well, lucky for everyone, there have been problems at every stage of the trial, so it's pretty even.
We'll see if she unfreezes or if she contacts me.
Oh, here she is.
Sorry.
That's all right, Ms. Mars. May we continue?
Yeah, please continue.
Ms. Mars, you were just starting to tell us what Agatha Lee said to the plaintiff about her will. Could you finish your answer?
Sure. She said, I will not give her a penny more, not now while I'm alive or after I'm gone.
What happened after this argument between the plaintiff and Ms. Lee?
Well, they came out of the room. And Miss Lee, she went to the car because I was gonna take her to lunch. And I'm standing there holding the tray, shocked. And then Stevie said something very, very weird.
What exactly do you mean? What did the plaintiff do?
Her face got red. She squinted her eyes and she said, don't count your millions just yet.
How did you respond when the plaintiff said, don't count your millions just yet?
I didn't say anything. I mean, what do you even say to that,
What happened after that?
I took Miss Lee to her lunch. I stopped at the pharmacy, dry cleaners, and then I came home with Miss Lee.
About how long would you say that you and Miss Lee were out of the house on August 14th?
We left around noon, came back 2 o'clock, so maybe 2 hours.
Did the plaintiff come with you?
No.
Was the plaintiff at the house when you got back?
Yes.
Do you know what the plaintiff did in the 2 hours you and Agatha Lee were away from the house?
No, I have no idea.
Well, Ms. Mars, do you know if the plaintiff would have been able to get into your bedroom?
I mean, I don't see why not. I don't have a lock, so yes.
Are there any rooms that have locks on their doors?
Only Agatha's room, but she barely ever locked it.
Did you see if she had locked it on August 14th, 2018?
I didn't see her lock it, no.
So, Ms. Mars, do you know what the plaintiff did in those 2 hours while you and Miss Lee were out of the house?
I have no idea, no.
Then I want to move on to the police investigation of this case and the evidence that they found. Are you familiar with what the police found in this case?
Yes, they talked to me about it later.
And were you here for the testimony of Detective Bond?
Yes.
Did you hear the detective talking about a black bag that was found in your bedroom?
Yes, I heard that.
Have you ever seen the bag that they're talking about?
Not really, but that closet, I don't like to use this word, but Agatha is a little bit of a hoarder, so there's a bunch of stuff everywhere. So I moved things around and her stuff in the room when I needed to get my stuff. So I wouldn't be shocked if it was Agatha's, but I don't remember seeing it, no.
Did you also hear the detective mention that there was a drug called chloroandramine found in that bag?
Yes, I heard that.
Do you know what chloroandramine is?
Yes, it's a drug they use to treat heartburn, but Agatha was allergic to it, so I never brought it into the house. You know, I just used Pepto-Bismol if I needed.
Ms. Mars, on August 14th, when you went to the pharmacy, did you buy any chloroandramine?
No,
Was that chloroandramine in the bag yours?
no,
Would you ever buy chloroandramine?
no. She was deathly allergic. I would never even bring it into the house. Never.
Ms. Mars, on August 14th, 2018, did you believe that you were about to be written out of the will?
No,
Even if you had believed that, would you have tried to murder Agatha Lee?
no, of course not. Of course not.
Would you ever have tried to murder Agatha Lee?
No, never. She was like my mother. I would never do anything to even hurt her. Never.
Thank you, Ms. Mars. Your Honor, nothing further.
Thank you, Counselor. Cross-examination.
Yes, Your Honor. May I proceed?
You may.
Ms. Morris, good afternoon. I'd like to talk to you about your relationship with Miss Lee before and after Miss Rogers arrived. Is that all right?
Sure, just give me 1 minute because. Okay, go ahead.
Well, before Miss Rogers arrived in 2018, you'd lived with Miss Lee for about 8 years. Isn't that right?
Yes, that's right.
In those 8 years, you'd say she treated you fairly?
Yes, very much so.
She covered all your expenses?
Yes,
The two of you became close, didn't you?
of course.
So close that you considered her family, right?
Yes,
Then in 2018, Miss Lee updated her will so that you would get everything, didn't she?
yes, I was so shocked and honored, really.
And you needed that money, didn't you?
No,
Well, you'd say your family needed that money, right?
sure, it would be helpful to my family, yes.
Your brother was sick, wasn't he?
Yes,
You often sent home money to your family, didn't you?
yes, I did.
And you know that inheritance that Miss Lee said she was going to leave to you? Well, it was worth about $20 million, wasn't it?
Yes, it was a lot of money.
But then your relationship changed with Miss Lee after Miss Rogers arrived, didn't it?
I don't know what you mean. She still treated me like family.
Well, you started spending less time together.
Yes,
Miss Lee started spending more time with Miss Rogers, right?
yes,
She started to spend time with her actual family as opposed to you, didn't she?
yes,
Then on August 14th, you overheard a conversation between Miss Lee and Miss Rogers. Isn't that right?
yes.
They were discussing Miss Lee's inheritance, weren't they?
Yes,
The same inheritance that you thought you would be receiving, right?
yes,
Now you claim that in that conversation, Miss Lee said that she would not change her will. Isn't that what you claim?
that's what
Objection, Your
I
Honor.
heard.
Argumentative as to claim.
Respond.
Your Honor, I'm just asking the witness what her side of the story is. We have conflicting testimony on it, so I'm highlighting that that's what she said.
Your Honor, may I be heard?
Yeah, last word.
He can ask what the witness heard, but framing it as claim is an argument that he is making. It's not permissible.
I think the witness is free to disagree that she is or is not claiming that. I'm going to overrule the objection.
So, Ms. Mars, you claim that in that conversation, Miss Lee said she wouldn't change her will, don't you?
That's what I heard, yes.
But right after that conversation with Stevie, you heard Miss Lee call her lawyer, Kirby. Isn't that right?
Yes.
And now that lawyer, Kirby, is the same lawyer who later read Miss Lee's will aloud. Isn't that right?
Yes, that's true. Miss Doolittle, she's a very nice lady. They have weekly meetings all the time, yes.
Well, she called her to set up an appointment, didn't she?
Yes.
So later that day, you went to the pharmacy, right?
Yes, I did.
And you don't actually remember exactly what you bought at the pharmacy, do you?
No, it was like 2 years ago, but I was, this is this is kind of embarrassing. I was it was my time of the month, and so I think I was getting certain products, but yeah, sorry, this is so awkward. I'm sorry. It's very embarrassing. Trust me, harder for me to say than you to hear. Trust me.
Miss Mars, is it your testimony here today that you remember exactly what you bought at that pharmacy?
Oh, no, I don't remember. Like I said, it was 2 years ago, but I used this application that, marks your days, so you can plan vacations and stuff. And I had the mark, so I was, yes.
Miss Mars, my question's very simple. You don't remember exactly what you bought at that pharmacy, isn't that right?
No, I don't, sir. You're right.
And you're aware that chloroandramine is a drug that's commonly sold at pharmacies, isn't it?
Sure, yes.
You knew that Miss Lee had a fatal allergy to chloroandramine, didn't you?
Exactly. That's why I would never buy it.
You knew that chloroandramine looked identical in size, shape, and color to Miss Lee's arthritis medication?
It does, exactly. Imagine if, she had an accident or something. So I never brought it to the house, yes.
So it's true that chloroandramine looks exactly like her arthritis medication?
Exactly, yes.
If the two were to get switched up, Miss Lee would never know, right?
I don't think she
Objection, Your
would
Honor.
know.
Calls for the witness to speculate.
Your Honor, this is a rationally based perception by the witness. She has been delivering Miss Lee her medication for 8 years. She says they look exactly the same. I'm asking if there's any way to tell the difference between the two.
May I be heard, Your Honor?
You may.
That's not what opposing counsel asked. He asked about a hypothetical situation, and in that hypothetical situation, for her to speculate as to what another person would know. It's not permissible.
I'm gonna sustain the objection. I think the question was worded as whether or not the decedent would know.
I can rephrase, Your Honor.
Yeah. Sustain.
Ms. Mars, you wouldn't be able to tell if the two drugs were switched, isn't that right?
No, not unless they were marked. Most drugs these days are marked for exactly this reason. But if they weren't marked, then you're right, I wouldn't know.
But you know that those were not marked, right? They were identical.
Those specific pills, yes.
And you were the one that handled all of Miss Lee's medication, weren't you?
Yes.
The night of August 14th, you had access to Miss Lee's pill organizer, right?
Sorry, could you repeat? You cut out a little.
Sure, I'm sorry. The night of August 14th, you had access to Miss Lee's pill organizer, didn't you?
No, I fill it in on Sundays, and she takes it every night by herself. She's pretty self-manageable.
Ms. Morris, it was possible for you to access it if you wanted to, right?
I didn't go to her room when she wasn't there that day, so I wouldn't see how I could touch it. But sure, in a hypothetical situation, sure.
Well, Ms. Mars, you know that the pill organizer is in Miss Lee's room, right?
Yes.
You know that earlier on the night of August 14th, you unlocked the door to Miss Lee's room, didn't you?
Yes.
So there would be nothing stopping you from going into the room and accessing the pill organizer, would there?
I would never unlock it without her permission. She was inside the room, and I asked if I could come in, and she said okay.
Miss Lee, redirecting you back to my question. There's nothing stopping you from going into the room and accessing the organizer, right?
When?
The night of August 14th.
I didn't go in there, no.
Miss Mars, my question is different. There was nothing.
Sorry.
There was nothing that prevented you from entering Miss Lee's room and accessing her pill organizer. Isn't that right?
Sure.
Now, the next morning, you're the one that found Miss Lee dead, aren't you?
I was, yes.
When Detective Bond asked to search your room, you refused, right?
Yes.
And you're aware that eventually the toxicology report showed that Miss Lee had been killed with chloroandramine, aren't you?
Yes.
You know that a black bag was found in Lee Manor during the search of the house, right?
Yes, it was found in the closet in the room that I stayed in, yes.
That's right, that bag was found in your closet, right?
Yes.
You know that on that bag, sorry, you know that in that bag were pills of chloroandramine, right? You found that out?
Yes, I heard about it, yes.
And you know that that bag with the pills of chloroandramine in it, well, it had your fingerprint on it, right?
I think someone said something about the zipper, yes.
Thank you, Ms. Mars. No further questions, Your Honor.
Any redirect?
Yes, Your Honor.
You may proceed.
Ms. Mars, opposing counsel was asking you about access to Agatha Lee's pill organizer. While you and Ms. Lee were out of the office, or were out of the house on August 14th, do you know of anything preventing the plaintiff from accessing that pill organizer?
No.
Thank you, Ms. Mars. Your Honor, nothing further.
No recross, Your Honor.
Thank you. Thank you for your testimony.
May the witness please
Thank
step
you.
down.
Yes. Next witness.
Yes, Your Honor. At this time, the defense calls Ryan Cabrera to the stand.
You may
Is this
proceed.
thing working? Oh, I'm sorry, dear. Is this thing working?
It's working, ma'am.
Oh, okay. That's good.
Could you please introduce yourself to the members of the jury?
Hello there. My name is Ryan Cabrera. It's so nice to meet you all.
And what do you do for a living, Miss Cabrera?
Miss Cabrera. Oh, you flatter me. No one's called me that in decades. Oh, what do I do for a living? I'm a writer.
Well, how'd you become a writer?
Because of my mother. You see, my mother, Vivian, was a frugal woman. She refused to pay for air conditioning no matter how hot it got. And keep in mind, we lived in Phoenix, Arizona. So I spent all my free time at the library to use their air conditioning, and I just fell in love with all the books.
Well, ma'am, then I'd like to move on and talk about your involvement in today's case. Do you know why you're here today?
Yes, I do. Drew asked me to come here to testify about her and Aggie. Aggie's Agatha Lee.
Ma'am, I want to be upfront with the members of the jury. After you agreed to testify, did you ever speak with Miss Drew Mars again?
Yes, we did chat for a little bit over the phone.
What about?
Drew asked me if there was anything of Aggie's that I wanted since she knew we were close. So I asked her if I could have some of her unpublished books in her book collection.
Why'd you ask for those unpublished books?
When I asked about the book collection, I knew that they were unpublished. So I thought they'd make a great addition for the Midlands Public Library silent auction. Their funding hasn't been too great as of late, so I wanted to help them out as much as I can.
Ms. Cabrera, with that in mind, I want to move on and talk about your relationship with Agatha Lee. When did the two of you first meet?
We met in early February of 2018.
What were you guys doing?
I was actually interviewing her for the biography I was writing for her.
Ma'am, these interviews, where did they take place at?
Most of them took place in her study, but sometimes we'd go to Culkin's campground to do our prancercise. Do you know what prancercise is? It's like an exercise a lot of people my age do. It's a little bit much for me. I'm no longer a young and spry 60-year-old after all.
I'm sorry to hear that, ma'am, but I want to talk about those interviews a little bit more. Now, when you two were meeting in Agatha's study, was there ever anybody else home?
Yes, her caretaker, Drew, would also be there.
Did you ever hear Miss Lee speak about Drew Mars?
Yes, she talked about Drew often.
What did she say about it?
What wouldn't she say about Drew? She kept going on and on about how much she loved Drew and how she was planning on leaving everything she had to Drew.
Response.
Yes, Your Honor. This falls under an exception to hearsay 8033. The early statements about her loving Drew, those fall under the witness's state of mind. And the second thing about her planning on leaving everything to Drew Mars when she died, that falls under statement of a plan.
Your Honor?
Yes.
Your Honor, first addressing the earlier statements regarding Ms. Lee's feelings towards the defendant. Rule 8033 isn't a blanket rule. It doesn't encompass any thought you might have, any statement you might make about your feelings. The second part of those statements regarding the need for a will, addressing or rewriting her will to include Drew Mars, I believe have already been elicited and admitted in today's trial. And so plaintiff is amenable to admitting that second set of statements, specifically the statements about Ms. Lee's feelings towards the defendant, are hearsay and do not fall under Rule 8033.
May I be heard?
You may.
Your Honor, that's incorrect. 8033 accounts for then existing mental feeling. At the time when Miss Lee spoke saying that she loved Drew Mars, that was her then existing mental feeling, and that's well under the purview of 8033.
Anything further from the plaintiff?
Again, Your Honor, referring directly to Rule 8033, while it does refer to a then existing mental, emotional, or physical condition, being fond of somebody, speaking positively of somebody does not fall under your then existing mental, emotional, or physical condition. And therefore, those statements don't fall under 8033.
I'm going to overrule the objection. Plaintiff's argument's well taken. I do think that the statement of how she feels about this person is an emotional condition, such as a mental feeling pursuant to the rule. So I'm going to overrule.
Sure.
You continue.
So Ms. Cabrera, after Agatha Lee told you that she loved Drew Mars and that she was planning on leaving everything to her, did she ever say anything else?
About Drew?
Yes, ma'am.
Those were the main things, just generally talking about how much she loved Drew and how she thought of her as a granddaughter, just things like that.
Well, ma'am, did she say anything about any other person in your sessions?
Yes, she did. She'd often mention her granddaughter, Stevie.
Ma'am, I want to talk about one of those conversations in particular. When was the last time Agatha Lee spoke about Stevie Rogers to you?
The last time it was the day before her passing, August 14th of 2018.
What did she say?
I don't really know what she was talking about, but she just kept saying things like, I hope Stevie will forgive me. I love Stevie so much. I hope Stevie can find it in her heart to forgive me. Just things like that. And it's just so awful.
Objection, Your Honor, to hearsay.
Response.
Yes, Your Honor, this falls under the same exception. 8033, then existing mental and emotional condition. She hoped that Stevie would forgive her.
Response.
Yes.
Your Honor, pursuant to your prior ruling that emotions or feelings towards somebody are acceptable under this rule, but the statement that she hoped that Ms. Rogers would forgive her, that feeling of hope does not fall under Rule 8033 and should be stricken as hearsay.
May I respond?
You may.
Your Honor, according to your previous ruling, the then existing emotional condition did not have to be just about another person, but could also be about themselves. In this case, Ms. Lee is saying that her mental feeling is she hopes that Stevie would forgive her. That's still under the purview of 8033.
Anything further?
Again, Your Honor, I would just reinstate that that feeling, that wishing, that hoping does not fall under Rule 803 as it does not speak to a then existing mental or emotional state.
Arguments are well taken. I'm going to overrule the objection. I think that this falls under the exception.
Ms. Cabrera, after you heard Miss Lee say, "I hoped Stevie would forgive me," did she ever say anything about planning on putting Stevie back in the will?
No, she never mentioned anything like that.
Did she ever say anything about planning on taking Drew Mars out of the will completely?
No, she didn't say that either.
And after Miss Lee said, "I hope Stevie will forgive me," did you ever speak with Miss Lee again?
No, that was the last day I ever saw her.
Thank you, Ms. Cabrera. Your Honor, we have nothing further.
Thank you.
Your Honor.
Yes, cross-examination. You may proceed.
Good morning, Ms. Cabrera.
Oh, good morning, dear.
I just have a few questions to ask you, if that's all right.
That sounds just fine with me.
So, Ms. Cabrera, you've actually been to Lee Manor before, right?
Yes, all the time when I was interviewing Aggie for her book, or her biography to be specific.
And you're familiar with Drew Mars, the defendant, right?
Yes, I know Drew too.
And you know that the defendant, well, she was Miss Lee's primary caretaker. Isn't that right?
Yes.
You also know that it was the defendant's job to administer Miss Lee her medication.
Yes, I think Drew did that amongst many other things.
Well, Ms. Cabrera, you yourself once saw the defendant providing Miss Lee with small purple pills. Isn't that right?
Yes, I did see that.
But Ms. Cabrera, you never saw Stevie Rogers handle Miss Lee's medication, right?
I've only seen Stevie once or twice, and no, she wasn't handling anything like that.
So, Ms. Cabrera, just be very clear for the members of the jury, the only person you saw handling Miss Lee's medication was the defendant, Drew Mars, right?
Yes, besides Aggie when she was taking it, of course.
Of course. So, Ms. Cabrera, I want to turn your attention to August 14th, 2018. Now, as you testified on direct examination, you did meet with Miss Lee that day, right?
Yes, we went to my favorite steakhouse since the last time she picked a place, it was Super Soups. And let me tell you this, their catfish chowder was anything but super.
So after meeting with Miss Lee for lunch, Miss Agatha returned to her home, right?
I assumed so.
Well, you never went to Lee Manor that day, right?
No, not that day. I just went back to my home after.
You weren't there at Lee Manor that evening?
No, I wasn't.
So you can't tell us what happened that night. Isn't that right?
I wasn't there, so I can't say.
So, Ms. Cabrera, I just want to bring up one final point. You're a fan of Miss Lee's writing, right?
Yes, I'm a big fan. I'm a big crime fiction gal.
And you know that Miss Lee was one of the most popular murder mystery novelists to ever live, right?
Yes, she's one of the greats. I'm very honored to have called her my friend.
And you're also aware that pending the outcome of today's trial, the defendant, Drew Mars, is set to inherit the entirety of Miss Lee's estate, right?
Yes, something like that.
Well, you know this because the defendant, Drew Mars, she told you herself, right?
Yes, I was there during the will reading, and I think Drew mentioned it. Yes, you're right.
Well, in a private conversation, as you mentioned on direct examination, the defendant mentioned that Miss Lee, she'd been fond of you. Is that right?
Yes, I would like to think it was easy to tell. We spent all the time together.
The defendant also said that if you were interested, you could also have a piece of that estate.
Oh, yes, Drew did offer me something of Aggie's belongings, so I decided to ask for the book collection since it'd make an excellent addition for that silent auction I mentioned earlier.
And that's right, that was your idea to talk about the book collection, right?
Yes, I asked for it.
And you know that in that book collection, there's a number of unpublished works written by Miss Lee, right?
Yes, all sorts of things. Short stories, haiku. She had that experimental poetry phase. Not my favorite, but, you know, not my cup of tea. It's all right.
Ms. Cabrera, as a fan of literature, you'd agree with me that a collection of unpublished works from one of America's most popular authors, that must be pretty valuable. Isn't that right?
Yes, most likely. That's why I want to donate it to the library.
So you'd agree with me that those collections of books to you would be valuable, right?
Yes.
And finally, Ms. Cabrera, you're confident that for your testimony today, Drew Mars will give you that share of the estate. Isn't that right?
Well, yes, I think, Drew didn't do what she's accused of doing. So yes, you're right.
So Ms. Cabrera, again, just to be very clear, you are confident that because of your testimony today, Drew Mars would be willing to give you that part of the estate. Isn't that right?
Yes, because I think Drew's in the right.
Thank you, Ms. Cabrera. Nothing further.
Any redirect?
Yes, Your Honor. Ms. Cabrera, do you plan on earning any money from the books you're going to inherit from Agatha's will?
Oh, no, certainly not. The library needs it more than I do.
Thank you, Ms. Cabrera. Your Honor, we've got nothing further. May this witness be excused, barring any recross?
Brief recross, Your Honor.
Recross.
Ms. Cabrera, regardless of any monetary value you may be aware of, you would agree with me that that collection of books is very valuable to you, right?
Yes, of course. They're Aggies.
Thank you, Ms. Cabrera. Nothing further.
Your Honor, at this time, we ask that Ms. Cabrera be excused.
Yes, thank you for your testimony.
Oh, you're welcome, dear. Have a nice day, everyone.
And at this time, the defense rests its case in chief and is ready to proceed right into closings, just barring an updated all lost time, just so both closers know where we're coming at it from, if we have that.
Yes, the all lost time will be 2:10 Eastern.
Correct.
11:10 Pacific, sounds like.
That's correct.
All right, let's proceed.
Closing from the plaintiff, Your Honor.
You may.
Your Honor, counsel, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, $20 million, 2 pills, 1 fingerprint. These 3 pieces of evidence make the defendant's wrongdoing clear. And that's why throughout today's trial, this defendant has lied about each and every one of them. The defendant tried to tell you, well, that $20 million was never in jeopardy. That the pills found in her room, well, she doesn't know how that got there. That the fingerprint that was on the bag with the pills in it in her own room, well, that was planted. Ladies and gentlemen, the evidence doesn't lie. But it's made clear that this defendant did. This entire case tracks back to one meeting. It's August 14th. The defendant overhears Stevie Rogers and Agatha Lee discussing the will. And as Stevie Rogers told us, well, Miss Lee said that she was happy her and Stevie had reconnected. That she would be leaving Stevie her entire inheritance. But you see, that was a problem for the defendant. Because the defendant thought that they'd be receiving that whole inheritance, that $20 million. So when the defendant noticed that her inheritance was slipping away, she's decided to take action. Because you see, her and her family, well, they needed that money. And now the defendant will have you believe that's not the way the conversation between Agatha Lee and Stevie Rogers went. She'll have you believe that Miss Lee refused to include Stevie in the will. But ladies and gentlemen, what do when you have conflicting testimony from 2 different witnesses? You look to the evidence. We know that after that conversation, Miss Lee called her lawyer to set up an appointment. Now, does it make any sense that Miss Lee would have a conversation about her will, decide not to change it, then call the lawyer that handles her will to make an appointment? To what? Tell her that she's not changing her will? Of course not. Ladies and gentlemen, this defendant thought that if they lied about this one conversation, well, then this would all go away. Then you heard about the 2 pills. Agatha Lee was deathly allergic to chloroandramine. We've heard over and over today that it's a drug commonly available at most pharmacies. So what did the defendant do after she overheard that conversation between Agatha and Stevie? She went to the pharmacy. What'd she buy? Well, in the defendant's words, I don't fully remember. But ladies and gentlemen, does it make any sense that she happens to not remember what she bought at the store that sells the same pills that were shown to poison Agatha Lee later that night? If the defendant's story seems a little too convenient, you can question it. What did they sell at that pharmacy? Chloroandramine. What was Miss Agatha Lee killed with? Chloroandramine. What was found in the defendant's own closet in her room? Chloroandramine. So can you take a guess as to what she bought at that pharmacy? Ladies and gentlemen, the answer is simple. Chloroandramine. Now, the defendant had to switch Miss Lee's arthritis pills for poison. As she admitted on cross-examination, well, the pills were identical in shape, smell, color to Miss Lee's arthritis medication. It would be impossible to tell the difference once she'd made the switch. So she waited. She waited until no one would see her. At 9:30 p.m., when she thought Miss Rogers had gone downstairs, she snuck into Miss Lee's room and carefully switched the pills. All she had to do now was wait. But what the defendant didn't know is that Miss Rogers wasn't fully downstairs yet, that Miss Rogers saw the defendant walking through the hallway with the pills in her hand on her way to Miss Lee's room. The next morning, the defendant found Miss Lee dead, just like she'd planned. But the defendant's plan wasn't perfect. You see, she didn't plan for the police to investigate the death of an 82-year-old woman who died in her sleep too closely. She didn't plan for Miss Rogers to hire a private investigator on the case. She didn't plan for her fingerprints to be found on the bag with the pills in it in her own room. But most importantly, ladies and gentlemen, what she didn't plan for was you. $20 million, 2 pills, and 1 fingerprint. 3 pieces of evidence that directly link this defendant to the murder of Agatha Lee. Now, members of the jury, I've said the word murder a lot today, but we're not here for a murder trial. Miss Rogers is suing Miss Mars under something called the Slayer statute. Now, as the judge will explain to you in a minute, that's a fairly straightforward charge. All we had to do was show you that it's just more likely than not that Miss Mars was responsible for the death of Miss Lee. We've done exactly that. Members of the jury, if you believe that it's more likely than not that Drew Mars is lying about the conversation between Agatha Lee and Stevie Rogers, if you believe it's more likely than not that Miss Mars went to that pharmacy and bought chloroandramine, if you believe it's more likely than not that that night she snuck into Miss Lee's room and switched her medication, then you must find her liable. This defendant took advantage of an 82-year-old woman who trusted her like a granddaughter. An 82-year-old woman who she'd lived with for 8 years. And as a result of the defendant's actions, Miss Rogers has lost the only family she had left. And the defendant did it all for just $20 million. This case isn't complicated. Allow Miss Lee's inheritance to be returned to its rightful heir. Find the defendant liable. Thank you.
Thank you, Counselor.
Closing for the defense, Your Honor.
Yes.
She was running out of money and she was running out of time. $2,000. That's an important number, so I'll say it again. $2,000. That's how much money the plaintiff had left in her bank account when she showed up on Agatha Lee's doorstep. She had blown through her parents' trust fund, and she was just taken out of her grandmother's will a few months before. She knew if she didn't get back into it, she'd be out on the streets soon enough. And so a desperate woman made desperate decisions because she was running out of money. She was running out of time, and she was running out of options. Now, you see, it's important today for the plaintiff to make you think that isn't true. Now, this case is open and shut, that they've done their job because they know what's at stake. They know that if they can't convince you by a preponderance of the evidence that Miss Mars was liable and knowingly or purposely caused the death of Agatha Lee, well, then the plaintiff doesn't get their money. That $20 million won't go to her. Members of the jury, they can't just bring you insufficient evidence and biased eyewitness testimony and tell you that's proof. They can't call Miss Mars a murderer over and over again until you start thinking she's one and tell you that's proof. Because you see, there's two things we got to keep in mind when looking at the plaintiff's story. One, did Agatha Lee actually plan on putting the plaintiff back into her will? And two, was there actually any reliable forensic evidence that pinned Miss Mars to the crime? So first, did Agatha Lee actually plan on putting the plaintiff back into her will? And we know she didn't. Miss Mars took the stand today and told you that Agatha Lee said she was going to keep Stevie out forever. Miss Cabrera came up there and she confirmed the exact same thing, that on the afternoon before she died, Miss Lee said, "I hope Stevie will forgive me." Now, the plaintiff wants you to think that conversation went a little bit differently. What the plaintiff's asking you to believe is that Stevie Rogers walks into Agatha's house after not seeing her for 7 years, gets on her good side for 2 months, and just like that, she's going to give everything back to him. Not leaving a cent for her devoted caretaker. No, she's made up her mind. Everything's going back to the plaintiff. But think about who you heard that conversation from. Besides the plaintiff, how many witnesses got up here today and confirmed that story? 0. Not a single other witness that spoke to Agatha Lee on the day before she died came up here and told you she was planning on changing her will. They told you the opposite. There's no phone records, there's no transcripts, there's no written documents, nothing proving a point that the plaintiff so desperately needs you to believe. You see, Mr. Rosati, he spent a good amount of time talking about Agatha's lawyer as well, saying how she made an appointment with her lawyer on Friday, and obviously that must have been the time when she was going to change her will. Members of the jury, Agatha Lee was a multi-million-dollar novelist. We're to believe that her one lawyer, the only thing she covered was her will? Miss Mars told you they had weekly meetings. You think Agatha's having weekly meetings with a lawyer about a will? And if it's true, if Agatha's lawyer was really planning on changing her will on that Friday, where is she? Why isn't she here today? Why didn't she tell you that herself? Why didn't the plaintiff bring their witness before you and have her tell you for herself? It's because they knew what she was going to say, that Agatha Lee wasn't planning on changing a thing. That brings us to our second point. Was there actually any reliable forensic evidence pinning Miss Mars to this crime? And you see, the plaintiff's smoking gun in this case, it's two things: Mars's fingerprints and a bottle of pills found in the closet. And let's think about those fingerprints for a second. Now, they're expecting you to believe that because Miss Mars's fingerprints are on 2 pills of Winterin, that she's a murderer. They're expecting you to believe that because she went to a pharmacy 2 years ago and didn't remember what she purchased, she's a murderer. Members of the jury, can you remember what you bought 2 years ago at a store? According to Mr. Rosati, you might be a murderer. You see, that's not how proof works. That's not how court works. And that's not enough for them to prove their case. You see, second is that black bag. We heard today that it belonged to Agatha, but it was kept in Miss Mars's room. Is it reasonable to think that she kept something in her closet for over 10 years and didn't touch it at all? Of course it's not, members of the jury, because the real evidence here isn't where the fingerprints were found, it's where they weren't. Where are the prints on that bottle of chlorandramine pills? I mean, that pills is what the plaintiff is resting on. It was found in her closet. This is the murder weapon. Where are her fingerprints? I mean, she was sloppy enough to leave it on the Winterin pills, to leave it on the bag, but all of a sudden in the last stretches there, she becomes a criminal mastermind and wipes her fingerprints off the only thing that could tie her back to the case. Members of the jury, the reason her prints aren't on those pills, the reason the plaintiff can't answer that is because she didn't put them there. But somebody did. Somebody who knew that Agatha Lee was allergic to it. Somebody who knew that if she ingested it, she would die. Somebody who knew if they did this, they could get a sum of over $20 million. You see, in order to believe that the plaintiff committed this crime, we've got to ask ourselves 3 questions, members of the jury. 1, did the plaintiff know how to kill her grandmother? And we know she did. She told you today she knew that Agatha Lee was allergic to chlorandramine. She knew where her pills were kept. She knew when she took them, and she had hours of free time before her grandmother returned, with access to her bedroom and access to Miss Mars's closet. All she had to do was wait for her to take the fall. Second, did she know that her plan would work? Of course she did, because she knew about the Slayer statute. She knows that if you kill someone, you can't inherit their money. So if she kills Agatha Lee, it makes it seem like it was Miss Mars who did it. Miss Mars wouldn't get a dime. And all $20 million would come back to the plaintiff. And 3, why? Why would Miss Rogers do this? Because she was running out of money. She was down to $2,000 in her bank account. Her trust fund was gone, and her grandmother had no plans of putting her back into the will. She was running out of money, and she was running out of time. You see, members of the jury, I've played basketball my whole life. And in basketball, there's this thing called the full court shot. And what it is when a team is down in points, when they're running out of time, when they're desperate. They inbound the ball all the way down at the other end, and they just chuck it, praying that it goes in. Agatha Lee's death, this lawsuit, this is the plaintiff's full court shot, and they are praying that it goes in. That's why your job is so important today, because it's up to you to make sure to hold the plaintiff to her word, to make sure that her murder doesn't pay out, to make sure that her plan doesn't work, to make sure her last shot doesn't go in. That's why we're going to ask you to find Miss Mars not liable. Thank you.
Thank you, Counselor.
Rebuttal, Your Honor.
Rebuttal.
May I proceed?
You may.
Over and over today, we've heard Mr. Benjamin say, running out of time, running out of money. That it was actually Miss Rogers who killed Miss Lee, and she's now framing Miss Mars. Well, that doesn't make any sense. Running out of time? Why? She was living with her grandmother, with all of her expenses paid. She randomly woke up on August 14th and decided that was the day she'd kill her grandmother? No. Running out of money? We heard that Miss Rogers still had a BMW. The defense is trying to tell us that Miss Rogers would sooner kill her grandmother than sell her car? Of course not. Ladies and gentlemen, there's no evidence that Miss Rogers was responsible for this. All we have is speculation and the word of the defendant. They want you to believe that Miss Rogers somehow planted the defendant's fingerprints on a bag in her room. They want members of the jury. Miss Rogers didn't even know that the arthritis medication looked the same as the chlorandramine pills. There was no way. Did you say time? I couldn't hear.
I believe that was time. I'll let you finish your sentence.
I had like a minute left according to my timekeeper. I don't know.
Yes, there was a minute left.
I had the closing started out total 7 minutes, 51 seconds. And then the first part of the closing was 6 minutes, 51 seconds, but it's fine. You can just wrap it up. Not that big of a deal.
We're good with it.
Go ahead and finish, Counselor.
Sure, sorry. Miss Rogers didn't even know that the chlorandramine and the arthritis medication looked the same. At some point, it's clear where the defendant's story diverges from the evidence. $20 million, 2 pills, 1 fingerprint. The evidence points directly to Miss Mars. Find the defendant liable.
Thank you, Counselor. That concludes our trial for today. Yay. I think, go ahead, Mr. Harper.
Sure. So I'm going to stop the live stream and I'm going to put the students back in the breakout rooms. Judges should use this time to complete your ballots and to submit them.
Okay, it said your ballot has been submitted. Thank you for judging. Is that it? Are we going to be able to talk to the students? What's going on?
Yes. Once I confirm that all of the ballots have been turned in, I'll bring the students back. So please unmute your video after you've submitted your ballot, and I'll wait for confirmation from the tab room.
Mr. Harper, I think there's at least 1 or 2 students still in the main room that haven't gotten the notification for breakout rooms yet.